Right. Hello, everybody. Let me just switch over the stream scene here. Where are you? There you are. Boom. All right. Hello there. How is everybody doing? I'm thinking let's jump kind of back to where we were the other day when we were working on this, and jump back right into armor, weapons, that sort of thing. So it's been a bit of a second since the last time I streamed, and in that meantime, I have been doing a bit of tweaking as far as well, a little bit more than that. I've been working on like the actual language here, so that way we can just kind of talk through changes, the actual language of the game, how it's going to work, rather than fumbling over words and trying to create it on the spot. That said, we're still going to do a lot of that because just kind of the nature of sharing the RPG on Twitch here. But nevertheless, let's go through what I have written here, and you'll see some areas where we have blanks that we're going to be hitting sometime today. I say sometime as if it's not going to be within the next hour or so, but that we'll be wanting to expand upon. So a lot of this is just going to be going over the rules of the RPG, or at least the rules of the RPG surrounding armor, surrounding weapons, and then expanding upon that. Okay, so armor. For most, armor is the simplest way to protect oneself. Adventurers have access to a variety of armor types, from padded armor to full suits of plate armor. The armor table collects the most commonly available types of armor in the Underkeeper RPG, and organizes them into 3 categories: light, medium, and heavy armor. Most classes are automatically proficient with the armors that work best for them. And as far as that goes, that's going to be light and medium armor. I've debated, and I haven't fully implemented it yet, but I've debated the idea of putting heavy armor exclusively behind feats, so that way characters have to train more in order to get heavier armor. And so heavy armor is going to be like your knight in shining armor, plate mail, and so there has to be character growth and development in that path in order to unlock that. Haven't fully worked out whether or not that's going to be a proper good idea, but we'll see. So armor and shield proficiency here. Once again, this is just kind of going to be basic rules for proficiency. Anyone can put on a suit of armor or strap a shield to an arm. A character's proficiency with an armor set reflects their ability to properly wear and utilize certain types of armor. Characters typically gain their armor proficiencies from their class. Players who wish to equip their characters with armors not listed as proficient on their class table can gain proficiency by taking an armor proficiency feat. Or tab. Sorry, I'm very used to the 5e way of saying it there. And so in my RPG, I've been calling them talents. Maybe that will change if the word feat does not manage to slip out of my vernacular when discussing it. Heavy armor penalties remains to be written today. Mostly that's going to be discussing just straight up the disadvantages here due to its weight. Gonna need to find a good way to talk about that in general, but we'll manage. Wearing armor and shields without proficiency. Character who wears a set of armor or shield that they are not proficient with are slowed. Oop, hang on, that needs to be italicized there. And have disadvantage on all strength and dexterity ability challenges. So that is slightly worse than what the heavy armor is here, because that's just disadvantage on specifically 3 strength and dexterity skills. There are a couple others and so that's just going to be disadvantage on all. And then slowed is going to be moving at half your base movement speed, or 10 feet, whichever is slower, whichever is higher. And so that's just going to be your standard hindered movement speed sort of thing. And I suppose, well, if you were trying to do heavy armor there, you could get a lot more. Well, actually, that is something we need to throw in there. The disadvantage for non-proficiency with armor stacks with the penalty for non-proficiency with shields if a character equips both while not proficient with either. Similarly, the penalty for non-proficiency with, there we go, get out of here, Google. Proficiency with armor or shields stacks. Yeah, it would say stacks. Yeah. With the penalties of heavier suits of armor. Next, with the natural penalties of heavier suits of armor, granting a disadvantage to your strength, the dexterity skills, and your base movement speed. There we go. So basically, if you are not proficient in wearing a suit of armor, you are going to be racking up several detriments by wearing it. So recommended, be proficient. That's the short answer of it, but yeah. Armor quality and durability here. This is another thing that we're going to be working a little bit on fleshing out here. So if we jump down onto our armor table here, where we have this information, but also to our actual armor stat blocks, of course, in quotation marks there, you will see that we have 4 different tiers of quality. This exists for a couple of... Excuse me, sorry. I'm a bit of, I don't know, something with the digestion there. This exists for a couple of different purposes. The first being so that way your shopkeepers in the world can have many different kinds of the same type of armor. So a leather worker can have several different types of leather armor at several different price points. So that way your blacksmith can have several different types of metal plate armor at different qualities at different price points that are automatically suggested by the armor, just kind of on the table. That's mostly for a GM tool there, but it has like information on, what characters can expect to sell and get from their items when they sell. I find having costs like that very useful as both a player and a GM. Going into that further, like if players come into town, they can just sell their like ragged gear and buy new gear. That is a perfectly valid strategy, but they can also take it to a place and have it be fixed up for them, and that's going to bump it up different tiers here, so that way you can have an heirloom family like piece of armor that gets passed down and then just is continually fixed up and patched up and like can continue to be a generational item that gets worn throughout your character's family. Like I like that as an idea, and I want there to be also the possibility of dramatic moments of maybe that like gets torn to pieces by a monster, and so like you can have great theatrical moments and discussions with your players about family heirlooms in that way. but also so that way if you want to have a character who is maybe playing a royal knight of the kingdom or the court or something, you might be able to equip them with plate armor from like level 3, but like the kingdom itself will probably be investing like in pristine armor for their entire livery, and so that way you can have a mechanical difference and distinction based on, you know, narrative investments by the political factions that be within your world. And so a knight who is kind of a mercenary on their own, they might have the same style of armor, they might have the same like make of it, but because they've been wearing it out in combat more, it has more damage to it than like a fresh suit of armor. So like, I don't know. I think that is a very fun thing to work on, and we just need to make sure that it's not extensive homework for the players, so that way people will be willing to engage with the system. And so that's where we're going to kind of, I think, start. All the red text here is just kind of like changes that I've made. So like, for example, I swapped the disadvantages on medium armor for the movement reduction in medium armor. Just because skill disadvantages with medium armor is going to be getting you a lot of skill disadvantages fast, whereas a movement reduction is a little bit more mercurial, a little bit more understandable to take at earlier levels. And I want player characters. This sounds a little bit odd. I think 30 feet per round is too fast, or at least 30 feet per move action, as far as like D&D 5e is presenting it, is a little bit too fast. But at the same time, I want players to have a greater opportunity, a greater ability to move in combat. And so that was one of the design decisions behind making the move action just a straight up minor action, so you can take it 3 times. And so if you take a move action 3 times on your turn with a 20-foot movement speed, that's going to get you 60 feet. Whereas moving and then dashing, so taking 2 actions in 5e gets you that 60 feet, and then you still have a bonus action. So I want that movement to feel like it costs you a little bit more, but there are also going to be other abilities that shift you 5, 10, 15 feet, or based on a heroic resource that is going to allow you to get that extra movement back. So having a bit of a movement penalty, especially at earlier levels, and especially since we were talking about maybe capping proficiency up to at the medium heavy line for early game, I don't want to be throwing a lot of disadvantages on a player character in the early game. And so being able to then just kind of control the movement speed and to scale off of that, I think that is a better compromise. Just since that is what you're going to be starting out with, and then if you choose to upgrade your armor in the future, you're just going to be taking on those disadvantages, not the reduced movement speed, so it feels less like a hit to your character's actual abilities, or like your mechanical ability. That way it feels less like a hit to how your character can act in a combat scenario versus how your character can act in a more roleplay and intermediary combat. I'm just having trouble finding the right word there. Basically, when they're not in a combat scenario. That's what I was going to say. So yeah. Increasing an armor's quality. Characters can can typically only increase an armor's quality level no, hang on. We don't want to say can typically only do this during an extended rest, because they can technically just take off the armor, leave it with someone, and come back to it. Level no. Each armor set comes no armor quality waxes and wanes. Is that the right way to put it? I kind of like the pun of waxes, and not pun, but like the fun little language there. It'll work. Let's just get something on the page first. As armor quality waxes and wanes. Players may stop by local artisans and blacksmiths. In towns, throughout the lands they travel to get their armor repaired. Yeah. Okay. As armor quality waxes and wanes, players may stop by local artisans and blacksmiths throughout the lands they travel to get their armor repaired. Each armor entry below listed below has a price to increase. Lists a standard price. A trained worker would ask. We don't need to say that. Lists a standard price that the player, the character, of course, can pay to have their armor quality increased by one level, from ragged to damaged. And so on. Yeah, for example there. Increased by one level. Is there anything else that we need to say here? Have their armor quality. Players typically repairing armor is done during a character's downtime during an extended rest, typically. Though this is not required. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about decreasing an armor's quality, because this is the part that actually is what we want players to interact with. So the way that armor works in the game is that you get a number of armor points, and those armor points can be expended in order to take the defend reaction, which is going to reduce incoming damage. Two classes, being the Berserker and the Pugilist, gain armor points when you're unarmored, but that's just due to their ability to either tank hits or evade hits, respectively. Other martial classes are expected to wear armors. Spellcasters are going to be able to reduce damage in other ways. I believe a couple spellcasting classes are going to get armor, but like wizards, sorcerers, probably even speakers are not going. I don't foresee them getting armor proficiencies. Okay. Decreasing an armor's quality. My thought process here is that when a creature takes damage while they are dying, so basically this is going to be like a once, maybe 2-time thing while they have the dying condition. If they take damage at that stage, their armor can be reduced. And then, of course, when armor is reduced in that manner, we'll calculate the new armor point value the next time they take like a short rest. I think that narratively speaking, that is rather thematic, primarily in the way that the character is already, they're already dying. They have the dying condition. And so it is at this point that basically things are going to start failing for them. If you're in the dying state, you've probably used most of your armor points. So you've shielded yourself from as much damage as you could with your armor. And so therefore it makes sense that the armor has taken several hits beforehand. If you are dying, then that means you're at 0 hit points, and you're still able to exist because you're then going to be taking on willpower points and fatigue points before ultimately succumbing to your wounds. I also want to just kind of keep it in, like keep it as maybe, as I think you can only reduce armor quality level once per encounter. So if you enter an encounter, are dropped to the dying level, which should happen on a semi-regular, not semi-regular, but it should happen a little bit more often than maybe like a D&D. But like, if you are going to be taking hits and losing willpower or fatigue, I think that if that should be a little more frequent. I mean, hey, yeah, you don't know, because that means like it is prolonging the period of the damaged state, and so that kind of leads into a little bit more of that. I don't know, saying dark fantasy feels a bit wrong because that's not really the genre that I'm trying to hit with this, but I do want to have a lot of those ideas in here, and part of that comes from being in a dangerous combat encounter and then leaving that combat encounter in a damaged state, and then you'd have to take time in order to fix that, or if you choose to press forward, you're going to have at least a setback. And so I think that having a setback of losing like a couple of armor points because you were on the brink of death makes sense within the narrative of the game. So let's go ahead and, I mean, it's all going to depend on play testing and such. But if we tie it to like critical hits or a critical flourish or any of that stuff, that's going to come up way too commonly. And so players will enter a battle with a pristine set of armor and they will leave with it being ragged, and that will genuinely suck the fun out of an encounter because it will be damaging players and their abilities too much in a limited amount of time. And so the gameplay loop then will be akin to go out, take an encounter, take an extended rest, go out, do another encounter. And so there's going to be this back and forth nature, and characters aren't necessarily going to be able to progress as much because the world is expected to kind of repopulate and redefend itself during the extended rest period. So I think we have to limit this by a combat encounter to like one level. That way it still has a little bit of that. I'd hesitate to call it a death spiral because it is still always going to give you some number of armor points even in the ragged state, but at the same time it is reducing your ability to defend yourself over an extended period of time. And so the idea is that it's similar to recoveries. If you're familiar with the Draw Steel RPG, actually, let me just go ahead and pull up Steel Compendium. Let's see here. Rules. I quite like this site, but at the same time, it does have its bugs, and it's not being responsive right now. There we go. So abilities, I think. Nope. So what we're looking for is health and features. Nope, that's also. Oh, search, yeah. There we go. So the way recoveries work in Draw Steel, and like hats off to MCDM because genuinely this is one of the things that I adore about their game. Like to the point where sometimes I question whether or not it's worth it to build my own game because it's going to have a lot in common. Like that's for me to deal with, but like stay where it was, thank you. But yeah, I adore the push-pull nature and system of recoveries. So recoveries represent the number of time your hero can take a breather and keep fighting. Spending recoveries lets you regain stamina, measure of any creature's physical vitality and capacity to shrug off or avoid damage. They use stamina instead of health points, hit points in this system. Running out of recoveries means your hero has reached their uttermost limit. When you spend a recovery, you regain stamina equal to that value, which is 1/3 your stamina maximum. You can spend your recoveries with a special maneuver, or you might do so with a little help from a conduit, a boost of adrenaline from a tactician, or inspiration. So it's just party maneuverability, it's party interplay that allows you to heal yourself in this manner. And you have a certain number of times that you can heal before you need to take a rest. However, as you're continuing through the adventure and getting and cutting down your number of recoveries, you are also increasing your victories, which is basically a preloaded heroic resource at the start of your combat encounter, and so therefore you can start the combat more powerful, ready to go. And so it creates this wonderful, genuinely wonderful dynamic where players are either incentivized to keep pushing in order to maintain their momentum, their higher damage, or to take a rest so that they can heal. And so that is something that I would love to have in my game, because I don't really have a victories like mechanic, and I want to avoid implementing that so that my game can be unique from Draw Steel. And so I think a way to do that is with armor, so that way you can continuously heal through your abilities, but eventually your armor is going to wear out, so you either need to leave it at a blacksmith shop in a town that you're visiting, you need to go home to heal, to repair it at level, whatnot. Something that is eventually going to force the players to take an extended rest. That's just kind of part of the thought process there. Wow, my computer is lagging. I wonder if there's like a... high memory usage, 1.3 gigabytes. That's... Once again, I love this site and I love the way it's done, but I think there's some... there's got to be a way to make it a little bit more friendly to kind of just pull up on a whim. So, decreasing an armor's quality. When a creature wearing armor is dying, and they take damage from a weapon attack. Their armor quality is reduced by 1 level. So that's the short of it. So now we have to figure out the proper way to put it as this only happens once per encounter. Actually, we could just say that. Why can't we just say that? This armor quality reduction can only happens once per combat encounter. And the reduction in available armor points reduction in available armor points is what? It is taken into account upon the completion of a character's next long rest. Okay. So, I mean, theoretically, if you go from combat encounter to combat encounter, you can put yourself in a rough spot. That said, once again, we want this to be a thing that happens gradually. If you get into a rough spot, that during, the first combat encounter of the day, that should be a sign to say, hey, we need to seriously consider like putting a pause on it, coming up with a different plan, we're going to need to kind of sit back, restructure our organization here. Whereas if you go into a tough combat encounter, survive, and then go into another tough combat encounter, the next encounter is going to just inherently be more difficult because you've already used a lot of your resources from the first one. A great example of this would be like the Aor arc towards the end of the Mighty Nine, where they're traveling with Lucian, and he is refusing to let them get long rests. And so they continually just get worse and worse off because they continually use their resources and can't heal them. And so what this does is, in that sort of scenario, you're not going to be getting your armor points back, but at the same time, if you have an ability that will let you recover armor points, it's not reducing your available armor points yet. So your armor is still getting worse. You can have worse combat encounters, and so you can go from pristine to ragged armor conditions. But until you take a long rest, until you complete that long rest, you still have the pristine number of points technically. So that way you could theoretically push yourself back up, though it's unlikely. Yeah, I think that works out fine. Let's move this table, because that's one of the things I want to deal with here. So the armor table, so that is going to come right here after armor. Okay, that should delete the table. Of course it doesn't. Thank you, Google. Just put it there. There we go. So what we should then do here is have... Why is that? That's why that's weird. Delete row. There we go. So we had a weird row in there. That's part of the formatting that we're trying to fix here. Delete table. There. So reading the armor table. That's heading 2. This is heading 3. So we actually need to have this be heading 4. Reading the armor table. Actually, no. Hang on. We do not need to have this section. The armor table is primarily a reference for experienced players, whereas new players are going to go to their specific armor stat write-up. So if we have reading the armor table here, that is just going to be doing double the work. Double the work? Half the work? No. It's not conducive to the way that we want this book to be read. Whereas this is a reference, and if you are looking for how your armor works, you go to here. This is going to have all of the information. This is just a quick tabled overview. Yes. So we don't need those headers there anymore. Let's keep a space there, just in between those different sections. And so heavy armor penalties. So we just need to write this section, and then I think we should be good for armor. We just need to look at shields next. So heavy armor penalties. The weight of an armor set restricts... Hang on. Heavier armor sets. Provide an adventurer with greater protections. The weight of these armor sets restricts and inhibits their movements. And abilities. So once again, this is just kind of creating that sort of dynamic, not dynamic, this is just creating this sort of how far can you push your willingness to wear a specific type of armor. Maybe you want to have a medium set of armor because it's going to get you more armor points. It's going to maybe, if you want to specifically have hide armor so that you can have the cold resistance that is conferred by it, since that isn't available really in any of these other forms. You are also then going to be sacrificing 10 feet of your base movement speed, and so there has to be this sort of slight balance to it. If you want to be able to choose your resistance or have, once again, have more armor points. Because even a worn set of medium armor is going to be more armor points than a pristine set of light armor. That is going to be true for heavy as well as medium. So like you can push yourself for stronger armor, but you also are going to have more penalties associated with it. So that creates this healthy, I'd say, dynamic of choosing weaknesses for your character. The weight of these restricts and inhibits their movement abilities. Even while proficient, no, hang on, we don't need to say even while proficient here. Characters who wear medium armor with or without proficiency of their base movement speed reduced by 10 feet to reflect the additional weight of the armor set. Similarly, in addition to the movement reduction, heavy armor sets grant the wearer disadvantage, strength, no, hang on. Ability challenges. So, athletic strength, acrobatics, dexterity, and stealth dexterity ability challenges. The same relationship is similarly reflected in shields, where medium shields reduce a character's movement speed, and heavier shields reduce grant disadvantage on line of sight skills. Alongside a similar movement. We don't need to say that. Great disadvantage on. We can just say what they are. Insight, wisdom, and perception wisdom ability challenges. There. As proper defense with the shield may partially block or inhibit a character's line of sight. There we go. That's the fantasy that we're going with here. Having the shield up, you have to kind of look around it. It's going to inhibit and reduce your line of sight. And so that's why those skills are reduced rather than other physical skills. So let's go ahead and get this all well, hang on. Let's look at armor, at shields here. So shields, we definitely want to have there be some descriptive text here. We're going to want there to be descriptions there. We have similar shields, so if you want a targe shield, a buckler, a parma shield, or a heater, those are all going to be light shields. I have also added the feature here, ablative. So when you take the defend reaction, you can reduce the incoming attack's damage to 0 at the expense of your shield. So typically the defend reaction is going to reduce it by in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 damage, which should block a lot of them, a lot of attacks. But let's say you're fighting a dragon and that dragon's claw comes down and you want to reduce that damage even further beyond what your defense can do. Well, if you're wielding a shield, you can block with that shield and it's going to break your shield. But you can instead break the shield and then keep going. And then also, Shield Bearer, they have this feature. When your armor quality would be reduced, you can reduce the quality of your shield by the same amount instead. So once again, shields are basically the temporary hit points to your armor sets. You're wielding a shield and, you take hits while you're dying, or a hit once, that's going to reduce your shield from maybe pristine to worn to damage to ragged. Your shield's quality will degrade, but that's perfectly fine. It's a shield. And so all shields are going to have these two features added in, where you can reduce damage to 0 and break the shield. Once again, just kind of treating it as a disposable consumable item, or to have it be a way as like temporary hit points for when your armor quality would be reduced. That said, I think as far as armor points go from shields, these are rather reasonable. It's just going to be 2, 2, 1, 1 for light, which once again, 2 armor points is substantial. Like that's basically upping yourself by a tier of armor quality. Um, Medium is 3,221. Once again, roughly one, maybe even a little bit more than that as far as armor quality goes. And heavy shields are 3s and 2s. So I think our cost to purchase should be a bit higher. So let's go ahead and actually jump over to the spreadsheets and tables section here, where I was doing a good bit of math on costs for armor here. So our typical formula here, I can break it down, is that cost to purchase is a set. So I have that typically going 15, 30, 45, 60 for light armor, where everything increases by 15. Sale value is by default half of that, and cost to repair is right in the middle. It's 3/4 of that. Now that said, for each individual suit of armor, I have adapted their cost to purchase, cost to repair, and sale values, and have that be kind of a cumulative thing that will increase or decrease from this base state. So once again, that has it changes the nature of kind of commerce and the items your character would want to choose here. That's why plate armor is much more expensive, and it's also harder to maintain because it is more expensive. Whereas padded armor here, cost to purchase is going to be 40 here, so it's actually at 2/3 of it, and that's once again at pristine level. But you can get a ragged padded armor for about 10 gold pieces, so it's just several layers of clothing at that. And then you can pay 4 gold to increase that to damaged, 8 gold to increase that to 30, and then 12 to increase that to 40. So at that time, I'm beginning to see an issue here, because pristine costs 40, and then you're spending what, 24, 34 to. Actually, no, I kind of like that. I kind of like that dynamic where the cost to repair, because at the same time, no matter how much you spend, it's not necessarily going to ever beat the sale price. So if you buy it at 10, you spend 4, it's still going to sell for 10, so you're still out 4 gold pieces. So it's the economy shouldn't be broken here. I'll have to once again double check for any of that now that I'm specifically looking for it, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. So let's set this up for shields. Light shield, medium shield, and heavy shield. Let's set all of our values here to 1s. So once again, that should just set it to where we wanted. So for all of these here, we are referencing. Okay, so we need to set L's to Q's. I am realizing that I did miss one of the previous ones, so we're going to go back. And the reason that these need to be cell locked here is because it will Oh, hey. Message deleted. Nice. Looks like the I got a new stream bot on here to try and take care of some spam that was popping up there, and it looks like it's doing its job, which is fantastic. Now my computer is lagging a little bit there, but that's okay. I know why it is. The reason these all have to be cell locked is because each one of these is going to be referencing onto this main table. Honestly, maybe that means it doesn't necessarily need to be row locked, but I'm already kind of way too in on it, and I'm just gonna change it. Change the letters. Very much kind of sunk costs there, but you know, what can you do eventually? Like, sometimes there are just bugs in programming and you just fix them, because I'm not going to be introducing any new armor tiers. There's not going to be an extremely heavy, there's not going to be a shield for your shield. So like, this is theoretically the last thing that would be needed to be put in here, so we're not going to worry about fixing the row locking for all of this, because that would just mean going into the previous one and then changing it twice per cell to, it just doesn't make sense. Whereas we can just change it twice per cell here to the correct thing and then not have to worry about copying and pasting it. So how's everyone doing today? See anything cool on Twitch here? Because I know I'm going to be wanting to do a raid out, because I have been, not gonna lie, kind of forgetting to do that, and so I want to make sure that I'm doing that more. As what all is going on today, that would be a fun raid. Has there been a lot of fun games being played in the D&D category? I think, because yeah, I'd love to hear about your current campaigns as well. Okay, cool. So what I'm thinking we do here is we've reached a good place as far as the RPG design, where we've been basically working on thirds. And so that would basically mean that our light shield here is going to scale at like 2/3, 1/3, 2/3. And so it's going to be cheaper than our shield baseline. Our medium shield will be our shield baseline primarily, and then our heavy shield will be a little bit more than that as far as costs go. And so I feel like we've gotten to a good point with how that is calculated. And I'm very sure that this can be done with further nested functions here, doing the math from the baseline to incorporate the 1/2, 1/3, sorry, 1/2, 3/4 original relationship. But once again, I've kind of already got the spreadsheet into this position, so I'm just going to work with it in this manner. Once again, I'd rather just be able to read the code here and kind of see its references rather than have to debug an entire long line rather than, you know. And see what each area is putting if there's an error instead of being able to pick up on the reference. All right, final 4 here. Final 2 cells. All right, and there we go. That is going to be all of the recoding there done. So let's go ahead and get our default shield values plugged into this column here of the spreadsheet. Are there? Okay, so it looks like our current system is just adding 20 and then 40. Yeah, no, we can do much better. So let's treat the medium shield here as our baseline. So pristine is going to be 40, then 35, 30, 25. Then that should automatically put in here that we should be expecting average cell values of 20, yes, 18, yes, 15, yes, 13, and cost repair of 27, 30, 23, and 19. Beautiful. So, light shield here, following our standard practice, is going to be 2/3. Then this here is going to be 2/3, and this one here is going to be 1/3. This section here is going to be 2/3. Then this here is going to be 4/3. That one there is going to be 1, and this here is going to be 4/3. And so therefore we have a light shield value of 27, 24, 2017, which is a little bit more expensive than the light shield was in our previous iteration, but I think that feels a bit better, so that way players aren't constantly churning through light shields as just a consumable resource. Now granted, that is still going to happen, and that's a gameplay choice that is perfectly fine and makes sense. Actually, hang on, let's let's just jump over to the 5E SRD. And I'm just curious what they price shields at. Once again, because I'm trying to shoot for at least a little bit similar here. And so if we're in the ballpark, shield, no shield spell, shields, yes, in armor. Shield here costs 10 gold pieces, so our shields are slightly more expensive. Okay. But our shields do more, so yeah. I think I can live with this. So if we jump back over to our drafting tab here, once again, I need to get my bubbles back working up because that page is just infested with ads. Here, actually, give me one quick second. I will be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Just wanted to get a quick drink. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump down to our shield here. We've got good curves as far as armor points that are going to be granted via shields. And then we also are going to now have prices that reflect the functionality of the shields better, in my mind, of course. Here, so let's go ahead and this goes to 27. I suppose I'd like to see this in red, but it doesn't have to. Too bad, we're gonna do it anyway. I mean, we're probably gonna just change this right afterwards, so it doesn't. It just shows me how much we've done differently over the last couple streams and such versus where this was before. So 27, 24, 20, and 17. Then NA 987. Oh, that 8's actually going to stay the same. That's cool. Then our sale values here are going to be 14, 12, 10, and 9. And once again, we might have to return to that calculator there. We might be wanting to, tweak those, tweak these curves as far as commerce goes, just because actually this one should be basically all the same, except for the middle here. This one, just because maybe we will end up implementing like a full-on currency system for the game. I don't plan on it. That's a lot more outside of the scope of what this game was originally intended to be. I mean, it was originally intended to be a weapon fix for 5e, and then I thought I could do something cool, and it's much better now, but it's also a lot more. And then heavy shields here. Yeah. So cost to purchase is going to be actually significantly less. That Maybe that... It feels... I don't know. It feels a little wrong, but I'm going to just trust the math. Or at least trust my vague understanding of how I want the math to be. And we're going to have to test it in kind of an actual play setting. Which means hopefully I will actually get my campaign up and running for this game. And hopefully it's probably going to be like next summer, next fall, but that's fine. That's fine, because I've got friends running now, and so like I cannot complain, because their games are great. So 19 there. Finally, our sale values here. 27. We have 24. We have 20. I just changed it back to black. 20, and then we have 18. All right, there we go. So let's go ahead. Full screen here again. We've got everything all worked out there. We do want to add in descriptions for shields, and then have that intro text there. So here, let's see. Yeah, no. Let's just get it done. Let's just get it all taken care of here. So how do we say this? What is the way to put this? Okay. Shields in the Underkeeper RPG come in 3 varieties: light, medium, and heavy shields. Each of these types of shield confers armor points to its wielder. Can be used, can be broken and damaged in place of armor sets throughout an adventure. Each shield comes with 2 unique properties. Ablative, which gives players the option to expend their shield to completely negate the effects of an incoming attack. And Shield Bearer which lets the shield serve as a supplement to your armor's quality. Now, hang on. Shield serve as a buffer to having your armor's quality be reduced while dying. I mean, once again, that's kind of just restating what all these do, but I think that it's useful to have as a description just for the game itself. Let's see here. What would a description of a light shield be? So for our armors, we discussed kind of what it's made out of, what all it covers. Sorry, my ears have been itching substantially on the inside recently, and I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Light shields are typically constructed of wood or what? Thick leather bound to a wooden frame. These shields are designed to be easy to wield and deploy. Designed to be easy to wield and easy to wield and repair. Yeah, I think that we can just kind of leave that there. Let's go ahead and add our line space there for similar shields. So medium shields here. These are going to be incorporating an amount of metal. These shields are going to be hardier than their light cousins. These shields really incorporate layers of metal into their design to greater protect their wielder combat. Really incorporate layers of metal into their combat. more customizable with different armor. These shields, they're more to okay, so I think we can just leave mediums there. Let's go ahead and jump into heavies. Heavy shields are what? We can't just say heavy shields are the heaviest shields an adventurer can wield. That's a level of repetitive that even I'm not comfortable. Heavy shields are primarily made of metal and are strong to most attacks an adventurer would face in the wilderness. Heavy shields are typically carried by knights, nobles. Definitely put a K there, and it didn't recognize it, but whatever. By knights and nobles, and are often heavily detailed with their wielder's heraldry. They're metallic construction and typically larger sizes. Make them difficult to wield or maneuver effectively. That's feels rough. I don't like saying that. We don't have to say that. Just they're heavy shields. They're made of metal. They're heavy. It says it in the name. Okay. The character's class will note whether or not they are proficient with shields. Hang on, we don't need to put that here. We'll put that in the actual proficiency up at the top. Get that red. Let's make that red. There we go. Character is either proficient with shields or is not. Their class features list will note if a character is proficient with shields, they can readily equip any shield in the RPG shield heavy, medium, or light. Why would we be doing that in reverse? Light, medium, or heavy? Character who does not gain proficiency with shields from their classes features can take the gain proficiency by taking the shield proficiency tablet. There we go. Now we've got an actual clause in there about shield proficiency, and we don't have to put that with shields specifically. Overall, I think we're in a great spot here. So I think let's go ahead and copy everything from armor here into our core document. That's the classes page. There we go. Let's go ahead and let that load there. Let's see, where is there we go. Okay, so we don't have anything here right now. That's fine. So we have kits, we have armor, we have weapons. This here is going to be our armor section. Going to take a second to process as it brings over all of that data that we just wrote up there, and there we go. Nice and beautiful. Let's go ahead and find a good emoji for armor. Is there like a knight? Is there a helmet? That's... We'll use an army helmet. Oh, it's not showing up there. Dang. Let's try this one. That'll work. weapons of, I mean, it's going to be a sword, but unfortunately we've used a lot of swords. We'll just use swords. No, that's a chapter. Dagger. I know we've used that one for others, but it'll be fine. It doesn't matter that much. I just like it to look nice here, personally. I mean, that's the same thing. It's literally the same. That's not the kind of gear I was looking for. Hiking. Sure, a boot. That'll work. Okay, so there we go. A little bit of a side tangent off there. Let's go ahead and just reset this all to black text. Text color. There we go. Yeah, so we're gonna need to reset heading text types. That's fine. It's 3. This is 4. This is 4. Like, we knew that this part was gonna happen. We're there. Here. Light armor here. This is going to be 3. How far are we? There we go. We don't have to reset what's in the boxes there because that's already heavily formatted itself. Heading 3 there. And shield. Oh. Then each of those also is going to need to be formatted in such a way that it has space after paragraph. Heavy armor there. Space after paragraph here. Why did that get higher? Medium armor there. Does it already have that? Yeah, it does. Okay. It just looks small. Everything here. Add that space after paragraph. There we go. Alright, so there we go. Armor is formatted. Armor is in the core document. It looks great. I feel very proud of that. So let's take a quick break. And then I will be right back to do some, and we'll talk about something else. It'll be fun, I promise. Okay, I've got my stuff. Okay, there we go. Big face now. So I was kind of bored. In and around when I was working in my notebook here upon just doing text for armor stuff, weapon stuff, that sort of thing. And so I was decided to do a little bit of, well, I wasn't really feeling world building, which is a thing because I've been needing to get back into doing like world building streams where we finish up the elemental plane of water, the elemental plane of earth, and that sort of thing. But I wanted to do some mechanical design, and I wasn't sure kind of how to do it and kind of how to tie it into different settings. And so I was browsing, as I frequently do, the Dark Sun subreddit, because I am a big fan of the Dark Sun campaign setting for classic D&D. And so I was like, well, I have this idea that I want to do. I have an idea of what Dark Sun would look like in my game, and I want to include something along that line as a campaign frame and optional rule setting in the core book here, so that you can take these ideas and just incorporate them into your game with actual mechanics to do so that is going to fulfill the fantasy of that game. And so I've got a couple of ideas as far as just basic campaign frames that I want to include in the core book here. One of which being like the company. So you're a mercenary company similar to like the Chain of Acheron or the Black Company. And so you're going to have different roles and titles for your characters as they adventure. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. So because of copyright, I can't call this the Dark Sun area. And I also don't want to step on the toes of fellow designers in the space like MCDM, who have this great title for I think it's a spacey sort of game called Dead World Under a Black Star. And I don't know if that's what would finally make it to, print, but like that's just a very evocative title and a very evocative set of imagery. And so I kind of combined a couple of those ideas into the campaign frame here. Tyranny Under a Black Sun. And so right now there's not much in here. It just says Dark Sun. Dark Sun, like this box set here. This is an original AD&D 2E Dark Sun box set. Unfortunately, it's not quite complete. So it was missing one of the rules. Here, it's been a second since I've jumped into this specific box set. So I've got Wanderer's Journal into Athos there. Got the flip books and such. Maps. I think I am missing the core Dark Sun rules from here. But in order to fulfill that, I got the print on demand from Drive-Thru RPG of this box set, so that way I can read through it without risk of damaging my originals. But at the same time, Dark Sun is just the best. It's not the best. There's a lot of dark subject matter in Dark Sun that is inherently woven into it, into the gameplay, into the world of Athos. And players and GMs need to know that, because if you're not looking out for it, you can kind of deal your players a bad hand here and not have an authentic Dark Sun experience. Because the way that the Dark Sun campaign setting works is that at every opportunity, it is giving players an opportunity to not be heroes. You can choose to defile, you can choose to engage in horrible acts that have permeated humanity like human culture for a while. And so there is, who was it that did that really sick video on YouTube about Dark Sun? I'm gonna pull it up here because, well, we're not gonna watch it because, you know, once again, copyright. I want to respect my fellow creators here. But I'm going to pull it up in such a way that to recommend it. Let's see here. I think this is it. Who is this video by? Come on, please tell me. Is it the one that I saw? That is not it. There we go. Yeah. So yeah, it was from the D&D Shorts channel, and as far as can now, YouTube search engine optimization is like, so I played D&D's most controversial book. But it's all about how awesome Dark Sun is, and seriously, go check this video out because it is a great primer for this setting, and it talks about like the idea of Dark Sun in 5e. It talks about and the history of the setting here. Dark Sun is a great campaign frame, and it's a great thing that people should be able to play that is going to be mechanically different from your standard fantasy RPG. And so that's why I want to make sure it makes an appearance as a campaign frame for the Underkeeper rules, because playing in a Dark Sun style campaign should feel different than playing in a standard D&D campaign. So, I believe I was teasing this stuff a little bit ago as far as kind of how this mechanic works. I drafted what defiling mechanics would look like in this game. So here, let me go ahead and jump back to main view here. We're just going to be sketching out notes here before jumping back to weapons, more than anything just because I'm very excited, to just be talking about this setting that I can't say it means a lot to me because I haven't gotten the opportunity to play in a Dark Sun campaign, but a lot of my campaigns have been at least partially inspired by it. Maybe not directly, but definitely subconsciously. So let me jump over to where I made the notes here over on Discord. Sorry. So Dark Sun, where are you? And just as a note, if WotC does make a Dark Sun for 5e, considering how anti-WotC Dark Sun is as a setting, or at least anti what WotC is now, is just this capitalistic husk of a company that is seeking infinite growth. it's probably not going to be very authentic to the setting, or at least they're going to have to cut out a lot from it. But the thing is, I'd rather them just go ahead and do it. I'd rather them make it so that way you can create actual official Dark Sun content on the DM's Guild, and that Dark Sun content can be reflective of Athos and its true nature and the actual thesis of the campaign setting as it existed in AD&D and as it existed in 4th edition. And you can have that as a third party creator. Having access to that setting and being able to design for it in 5e is something that is going to be just great for the design community as a whole, because I don't have faith that WotC is going to properly say what the core arguments of the Dark Sun setting would be in that book or in that box set. Would I buy it? I don't know. I bought Spelljammer, and Spelljammer was a disappointment, but at least because I have my core old Spelljammer books. Like, I can look back through it and get a lot of that. And Spelljammer was kind of a disappointment. It was more than kind of, but like, I want to believe in it. That's the thing. And I want to believe that Wizards of the Coast would do Dark Sun right, but I don't have faith in them as an organization, that they can tell the kind of story, that they can set up the pitfalls of heroism that a Dark Sun campaign setting should have in it. Maybe I can't either myself, but that's what we're going to try and do with this campaign frame here. So let me just see if I can bring this all up here. Yeah. Hopefully this will just kind of show standard stuff. So I don't have a ton as far as what it is here, but let's just go ahead and copy this information there. And bring it in here to talk about. Just because, once again, I'm very excited about this, and so maybe this is me giving it away to you guys, so that, and ending up like opening it up in such a way that you guys can take it and run and do it in your own campaigns. And so maybe this is not the best idea, but I'm very excited about it, and I want to share. So this idea, this pitch for how a part of a Dark Sun campaign would work, is the world of Athos is cursed. It has been defiled by sorcerers who have wrought magic from the land and ruined the homes of people who would call that land home. And so magic is inherently confrontational to the ethos of life. The villains of Dark Sun are sorcerers. They are... oh, crap. There's a cool word for it. I believe it was like Templars or something like that. Man, I'm showing my bad memory there. Sorcerer Kings. No, that doesn't sound cool. But the point is that they have drained the resources from the land and are poisoning its people through their magic. Once again, not quite, but once again, we can, or the way I'm describing it is a bit of a way that we can tweak it for our way so that it is legally distinct from Dark Sun. And so what I was thinking of doing was having a free action cantrip that people can cast alongside their magics to defile. Cantrip will consume either some of your hit dice or create an accursed area around the effect the area of effect of your spell. And so accursed would be this sort of condition that is going to erode at land. And it would use the technology that we developed here live on Twitch for area-based conditions. And so, if we jump back in time a little bit here, jump over to where we have conditions, we can jump over to the obscured condition. Because this is a lot of how this accursed land-based condition would work. So, obscured. When a creature is hidden by terrain elements, whether partially or fully, or cloaked in the shadows of night, they are obscured. Creatures and areas that are obscured are more difficult to perceive and target with attacks and spells. The obscured condition behaves slightly differently to other conditions, in that instead of being directly applied to a creature, the condition is applied to an area and all creatures within the area gain the condition's effects. Areas that are obscured are measured in 5 levels, with each level further reducing visibility in the area. Some examples of obscured areas at each level are noted below. When using the obscured condition as a reflection of a creature's ability to hide behind obstacles, it is the game master's final discretion regarding when a creature's line of sight is broken. Areas can be obscured naturally up to a maximum of 4th level. Abilities that increase or decrease an area's obscurity will specifically note whether or not they can reduce or inflict supernatural darkness. So, once again, just kind of saying that basic piece of information there, we can take the idea of affliction. So we have spells that will defile, and that will increase an area's affliction level. And so affliction would probably be similar to obscurity in that it is measured in 5 tiers, 4 being natural and the 5th being supernatural, or in my case here for a Dark Sun style campaign frame, permanent. A lot of the land in a Dark Sun style campaign would be afflicted. And so players, as they're going about, can choose to either defile parts of the land for their own power, to power up their spells to commit these evil acts by continuing the defiling, to create, or perhaps would be then creating more permanently afflicted terrain. Or they can choose to, if we actually jump back, once again, we're going to be jumping back and forth between this area and my notes idea here that just really energized and made me want to share this. Or to restore. So when you defile, it is going to, what is it? Increase the effect of the spell by 1 spellcraft level. So it's basically a free upcast. So think of if you have a defiling fireball, you cast it at 3rd level, but you get the effects of a 4th level fireball. So it's going to be an extra couple of dice of damage, maybe a bit of extra space or an area, depending on how you use maybe sorcery points in addition to that. It's standard spell casting, but it does something extra because you're defiling. It's more powerful, and then it will create an area of effect that increases the accursed level. Once again, accursed, defiled. I'm still working on the exact language here, so that way it can legally exist, but also because this is just basic notes. So areas that are, we'll say defiled or accursed. I'll use the two as the same here. Maybe creatures in that area are banes. They have disadvantage on all things, but it's kind of a minor thing. Tier 2 creatures in the area can't heal using hit dice. They can heal through other means, of course. But, the second wind maneuver, sorry. Your healing is cut off there. So you're slowly taking away more class features. You're slowly reducing a character's ability to live in this environment because of how accursed it is. Creatures in the area start taking fire damage at the start of their turn, not as a part of a damage over time condition, but just the area has become inhospitable. The sun beats down upon it, and it is harder to exist in that space. And then fourth tier, the supernatural tier. All spells in the area are cast as if they are defiling. Once again, we're still workshopping ideas as far as the effects of these conditions in this area, but because each of these conditions can affect an area, and you can have multiple people choosing to defile or to restore the land, you can either then increase or decrease the accursed level of this area. And so there would then be a similar free action cantrip, so you would be able to cast this alongside any primal spell, at least as far as what I'm saying here, primal, where it increases the spellcraft level right now by just initial idea here by 2 levels. So a 3rd level spell becomes like 5th level. But it would also then decrease the accursed level of the land it is cast in by 1, provided the area is not like supernaturally defiled. And then once again, we're workshopping this idea here. It's just a basic pitch. But when casting a spell that is base level 5 or greater with Restore, it can reduce supernaturally defiled area by 1 level. So you can actually have nature growing back in the area. You can break the curse over a small area here. You can push back against it. You can weaken yourself to do good for everyone else. Maybe we have the damage only apply to like supernaturally defiled areas. I'm not sure. We'll probably workshop this a bit more to like have a defiled condition or something like that maybe will affect the players. So like if they continually cast defiled spells, they get some sort of mutation perhaps that will allow them to survive defiled lands. Once again, workshopping. This is not me jumping straight ahead to say, hey, we're writing a Dark Sun for 5e, we're writing a Dark Sun for Underkeeper. This is me saying, I want a campaign frame that works in this way, and I think we have the technology in the obscured condition to do it. So if we actually jump back to obscured, the effects of the obscured condition are not accrued cumulatively. The creatures only gain the effects of their current level. We might actually change it, how accursed would work to be cumulative. The reason obscurity only does not work in that way is because each thing encompasses the first one and then just adds on more to it. So it starts with advantage on stealth dexterity, then advantage on stealth dexterity and disadvantage on search actions, etc., as it grows and becomes more dark and more powerful darkness. So accursed might work more like fatigue in that sense, where it is accrued cumulatively. But once again, this is just me pitching the idea because I was thinking about Dark Sun. I was thinking about the strides in the technology that we have developed here for this RPG, and it just genuinely made me excited. So when I had my stream the other day, that was armor and weapons and ... This was that and ... This is what I was excited to talk about. This is something I was excited to come to stream here with. It's something that we might not design in full for a while going forward, but it was just something that I thought of that I thought, man, that's really cool. And I can't wait to get to the point where I have the time and the framework and the actual core mechanics and rules of this system done in such a way that we can then go on Twitch here, that we can jump on and we can talk about the campaign frames themselves, the ethos, the like actual arguments and messaging of what a Dark Sun campaign can be, and work on how to incorporate those ideas into our own maybe 2 to 4 page spread, and give optional rules that capture that idea, that identity, the things that made that campaign setting interesting, that relentless question of, are you a hero? What are you going to do to stay a hero? Are you willing to participate in some of the evil in order to progress and to further yourself? I think that is something that we can do in this RPG, and I think we have some of the technology to do it. And that just genuinely makes me excited for the future of this development process and for the future of our Twitch community here and RPG design as a whole. Okay. So thank you for letting me kind of wax poetic and get excited about just a thought that I had and just a design process that I want to emulate there. Right now it's 4 o'clock. My time. Let me just do a quick check about plans for later today. Gotcha. Okay. So, sorry, some of my friends and I, my current D&D party, we're going to go to a nerd bar here in St. Louis. That we try to go there first Tuesday of the month to play in their trivia games, and we haven't been able to do so for a couple of weeks now, but we should be able to go back today. And so we've been planning on it, and so that's at 7 o'clock tonight. I've still got about 3 hours before that starts, and I just want to make sure that I have time to get ready, make sure we get our mulligans for it, and the like. Actually, well, no, because the categories have been they revealed the categories, but they aren't really useful as far as, hey, I can throw this into Twitch chat and say, hey, quiz me. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump back into the weapon design. Sorry. It's wild how you pick up your phone and all of a sudden you're just... Man, that's a useful piece of technology, but genuinely frustrating at the same time. Okay. Right. Weapons. So let's go ahead and jump back to our drafting tab here. Take a look at what we've got, what we're dealing with. Because I know weapons are something that we're going to be doing, because that's my Discord. Before I was playing around with profile stuff, because I've been rewriting so many of the weapon properties and flourishes over and over again, and trying to get the text and wording properly done and good and correct, and I do have it, but I want to kind of jump down to where weapons are here, and just let's figure out what needs to be done. Here. Let's go ahead and mark armor good on the drafting tab here, because that's just gonna feel great. I'm 100% going to share the final bits of armor being done to my Discord for my friends. See what they say, and we might come back to it based on what they tell me. I don't have a community Discord here yet. I'm in the process of setting something up there, but I want to try and like hit Twitch affiliate first. I want to try and have more people in the community engaging with the content and with the game design as a whole, and then I will open something up so that way we can work on games and projects together, have digital community and the like there. I figure that also might be where because once again, I've also been getting into a lot of self-hosting and like that sort of technology stuff, and so I'm thinking that right now I've got a media server for my house, apartment. I'm thinking if I kind of reformat the computer there, I can run that media server in Docker for my apartment, and we can just log into it there. Then I can simultaneously run a similar Jellyfin server for the community, and that's where I can post, or at least host, like previous drafts of documents, things that just so that we like I have a change log there. You can use some of my old design stuff. I'd want to see if I can get it so that people could post their own stuff to it, because that would be sweet. And I know Discord has like a forums feature that would work something like that. I also figure that would be a good way to share the Dark Sun CD, not Dark Sun, the Red Steel CDs that I have that we were streaming and listening to the other day. So that once again, quasi-legal, it's just a small little community perk there where you can stream them from the server. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. Because that is something that I would like to do, but I want to try and have an active community first. And so, yeah, long-term plans, but they're forming in here, and yeah. Okay, so weapons. What do we need to do for weapons here? Sorry, text message. Okay. Weapons. So what we have here are a table that is things that need to be done, a table lists of things that are done, and then breaking into what the weapons are similar to armor, which is good because weapons and armor should be structured similarly as different pieces of equipment. So weapons. We're gonna get rid of that gross yellow highlighting. I feel like I did already create a weapons table, but maybe I guess I did. I think I just created a lot of weapons. I mean, we're gonna have a lot of weapons. That's just a fact of the game. I want people to have the ability to choose, maybe not obscure weapons, but weapons that are going to be unique and flavorful for different combat scenarios here. Let's go ahead and start to kind of put this into parity with our weapon system. Sorry, with our armor system here. So weapons. Introductory text. We have the weapons table. Then we have weapon proficiency. That is going to be here on heading 3. Yep. And then subset into proficiency, there is actually going to be weapon training. Subset of proficiency. Designated weapons. Okay, and so then, because we don't really have penalties, which is good. That is something that I feel really good about as far as how weapons work here. Weapons don't have quality and durability. Weapon training. Wielding. There should be a thing here on wielding weapons without proficiency. So. Rules and penalties for wielding while not proficient. Of course, I spelled that right. I threw an extra P in there. It's spelling. I'm great at spelling, but I'm not as strong as typing. Okay. So wielding weapons without proficiency there. So we don't have to worry about increasing or decreasing weapon quality because weapon durability is not going to be a thing in this game. I figure that that's way too many things to track. So a weapon is a weapon, and then if it breaks, that's because something dramatic happened. Then I think because I want there to be these lists of weapon properties and weapon flourishes. I wonder if it would be better to have this in an index rather than just straight up right here on the weapons area. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Let's go ahead and create a sub tab here. Maybe not index, but appendix. So let's go ahead and copy all of this. So that way we can have pointers in our text here to that appendix if you want to just see a list of all the weapon properties. But then in our GM section here, since we're going to have an area on at least a bit of the design and a bit of guidelines as far as creating your own content with the system, for homebrewing, for gameplay, for publishing, and that sort of thing, it would be nice to be able to just have those pointers to the same thing, if you know what I'm saying. So let's go ahead and jump back to our core text here. and take a quick look at what all we're looking at appendix-wise. Sorry, these are giant documents here, so it takes a good bit to load. Dev notes now, closing notes, credits, and licenses. Appendices, yes. Appendix A, quick reference tables. I don't know what that means. Tables you will use more often than not. Thank you, past me. That's not well. Yeah, no, I don't think that's useful. Okay. Okay, so we're going to have in this appendix here, we're going to have weapon properties and flourishes. We're going to have spell lists, just straight up long columns of spells, so that you can organize things by types, that you can organize things by classes, you can organize things by spell level, by spell list, that sort of stuff. So hang on. Index here, I'm going to just mark this as Appendix Z, since that's going to be the end of it. Glossary, that should be A. Appendix A is going to be glossary. We're going to move that ahead there. Appendix B here, we're not going to do the quick reference tables. We're going to have that be weapon properties, and we can change the letter and organization here. Then Appendix C here, that's Appendix C, that's going to be spell lists. Okay. Arcane, Divine, and Primal lists. By spell level. Spell by, I believe what's gonna, it's not School of Magic. I think we call it circle. And then yeah, I think that's good, because we don't really have class lists. We have spells that are based, so that's gonna be that's fine. Okay. Sorry, I just organization, and I want this book to be useful for game masters across the board. I want this book to be useful for players across the board. And so I think that having a strong number of appendices, having that strong number of resources is going to be overall a great boon to this game's readability, usability, and openness. Okay, so if we open up back to our interstitial drafting here, properties and such, we're gonna put that there. So then weapons here, then we have our simple weapons tables. Heading 3 here. Our martial weapons. Descriptions, sorry, plural, and then weapon tables, weapon charts, whatever. And this is going to be also a part of this as a subset of martial weapons here. Heading 3. We're going to talk about firearms in D&D. Because from a historical standpoint, people were still using swords when guns came. Guns came about early enough that, and they took them time to develop. So we're not going to have a paladin riding into battle like a semi-automatic. That's not going to happen. At least as far as the core rules of this game. But we are going to support some firearms out of the gate in the weapons area. And they're all going to be, martial weapons here. And so once again, it's going to require strong amounts of proficiency, and like tinkering kits and such in order to make sure you can fix and service your tools there. But so that is going to be a subset of it there. So this is all what we have to do. Once again, sorry, just checking time, seeing stream times and such, making sure I'm doing everything that I can to be respectful of the people I'm meeting up with later today. How long have we been? We've been going for 2.5 hours. Hell yeah. That is genuinely great. Cool. So what I'm thinking we do here is let's go ahead and jump into weapon properties and flourishes and just do our changes. Since we have everything fully written up, let's just make the changes. And then I think that might be where we call it, because that's going to catch up to a lot of where we are. And then I should be able to do a stream tomorrow in which we start taking these basic and trained weapon properties and we can start reworking our weapon tables, and we can work on the text then. I think that that's going to be what we do here, so that way we can set ourselves up for even more, for better streams and such going forward. So let us jump forward into my notebook. Oh, of course that one always requires more stuff. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, so our first property here is adroit. Okay, so this weapon can be wielded using 1 or 2 hands. When wielding it with 2 hands, your attacks deal extra damage, and using the damage die specified by the adroit property. Creatures that are smaller than medium and have a strength score of 14 or lower wield adroit weapons with 2 hands and use the weapon's normal damage die. I think this mostly stays the same, but nevertheless, let's go ahead and get our red. Actually, no, we're streaming. We could do a different color. Let's do purple. This weapon can be wielded using 1 or 2 hands. When wielding it with 2 8 mistyping makes me feel like an idiot. With 2 hands, your attacks use the damage die specified by the adroit property. Creatures that are smaller than medium or have a strength ability score of 14 or lower wield adroit weapons with 2 hands and use the weapon's standard damage die. There we go. Of course, wield didn't behave. That's kind of what I was expecting. So that is going to be our new text there. Just go ahead and clear out the old one. Boom, there we go. Yeah, simple stuff. I believe it's versatile in 5e, but it's the same sort of design language across the game. So autonomy here as a weapon property. Anytime you roll an attack with this weapon, you are considered proficient with the implement. This weapon property primarily exists because of unarmed strikes. But it opens up a design space where you can have a weapon that is a part of a character's body. So if maybe thinking of like a Long John Silver in Treasure Planet, where his arm is a part of his body and so he has a cutlass as a part of his arm, I would give that cutlass the autonomy property where he is considered proficient with it because it is a part of him. So this mostly exists for unarmed strikes, but it opens up that design language so that we can incorporate things like that down the line with the eventual sci-fi game. Especially. Okay. Backstabber. This is a weapon property that I believe primarily lives on the deck. Let me see here. So when you make a melee weapon attack against a stunned target or a target during a surprise round, your attack deals an additional 1W damage. So a lot of these weapon properties came about because I was designing for 5e. I've made no secret of the fact that this original version of the game was more or less just how do we make 5e weapons better? And so, given the 5e design space, having a weapon do an additional weapon die of damage wasn't really game breaking. That said, that's because 5e has the ability for characters to miss. And so a lot of tuning this in such a way that it would be very strong came with the downside of there's a chance that your attack does nothing. Whereas with my game here, characters don't miss, they just do minimum damage. They're minimally effective. And so having this trigger here, it boosts it to a level where the weapon is what is doing the talking rather than the action. And I like to think of this RPG as an action-oriented role-playing game. Like, so it matters what action you take, and having weapons consistently overshadow the actions, having a weapon that speaks louder and basically automatically applies a flourish to it is a bit strong, and so we do want to cut this back a bit. So let's go ahead and get our purple pen out. Once per turn. Once again, as it is currently standing here, this was any time. And so we want to cut it back. So usually you're just going to be attacking using your main action. But even then, sometimes that might describe a couple different attacks. It might in the flavor text there. So we just want to cut this off at the pass. Once per turn, this weapon property proc. So once per turn, when you make a melee weapon attack during a surprise round. Oh my god. Sorry. Because we have another property here that is also only during a surprise round, so Backstabber is basically a level up past that. Make a melee weapon attack against a stunned opponent or during a surprise round. Your attack deals an additional 1W damage. Now, hang on one second. This damage is added once all other damage is dealt. So we kept a lot of it in here, that it is still dealing 1W damage. And I believe a dagger is a D4, and this property primarily lives on the dagger. So at most, this is going to be an extra D4 of damage that you have to consider or worry about. But by noting that, once again, it's once per turn, so this isn't going to be triggering during like reactions or anything like that. So it's once per turn when you make a melee weapon attack, because opportunity attacks are not melee weapon attacks, they're opportunity attacks. This damage is added once all other damage is dealt, so it's not subject to any sort of scaling. If you have a weapon that modifies the damage that is done as a part of the attack there and says you roll like double the number of dice, I don't think we have anything that's specifically like that, but this is just, no, it's always just plus 1d4. That's what the text is saying there. So I'm very surprised. Right? There we go. Give me one quick second. I've got to respond to a couple text messages. I will be right back. Okay. All right. Let's jump back into this here. Once all other damage is dealt. There we go. So our next feature here is called Boorish Strike. The original text here says, when you attack a creature with this weapon and are not wielding any other weapon, your attack deals an additional 1W damage. Once again, this is adding in extra dice. This is making weapons speak louder than actions, and so this is therefore against the intended design of the game. Once again, this is a vestige of designing a mod versus designing a game. So when you wield this weapon and are not wielding any other weapons, your attacks use the damage die specified by this property. So what this does is it means we're going to say Boorish Strike 1d8 and have this plugged onto a club that typically deals 1d6. So if you're wielding 2 clubs, each of those clubs is going to deal 1d6 damage, but if you're just wielding 1 club, you can either do it two-handed or whatever, like a baseball bat, and your attacks are going to deal an additional roughly 1 point of damage, because 1d6 is an average of 3.5, 1d8 is going to be an average of 4.5. So it's going to deal a little bit more damage, but it is not going to add more dice to your attack roll. That's what that's going to. That's what we're saying it's going to. Boom. Here we go. Cavalier Strike. I think this is mostly the same. So, Cavalier Strike. You have advantage tier 2 on all attacks made with this weapon while mounted. So we kept basically the exact same thing. It's just we got rid of tier 2, so it's just going to be advantage tier 1. Just because giving a baseline advantage tier 2 is strong. And we want to, limit that to, once again, class-based things, action-based things, so that, once again, if the weapon is giving you an automatic tier 2 advantage, the weapon is speaking louder than the action, it's speaking louder than what you're doing. Alright, Deadeye. So this works actually very similar to how Backstabber works, but it's more for, I believe, great bows. And I think that's primarily where this feature lives. So, Deadeye. We're once again changing it. Okay, I'll read the core text as well. When you make a ranged basic attack with this weapon and have not moved this turn, your movement speed is reduced to 0 until the start of your next turn, and you deal an additional 1W damage. So, I think you can see where a couple of things here are a bit problematic. The attack is just automatically dealing 1W damage, so therefore we run into the same issue where that could be scaling or being influenced by other modifiers to the attack roll. But similarly, the conditional statement of when you make this attack and have not moved this turn, it also then affects your base movement speed, which can impact your ability to take other actions or to take parts of actions that include like shifting around. So for Deadeye, we took a lot of the text and technology that was put into Backstabber and then reworked that for ranged weapon attacks here. So you're going to see a lot of similarity there. Once per turn, when you make a ranged weapon attack during a surprise round or against an opponent 100 feet away from you or farther, your attack deals additional 1W damage. Then, of course, the same rider from Backstabber, this damage is added once all other damage is dealt. So what this is doing is the feature is now building in the fantasy of being something like a sniper. You're shooting someone who is very far away, and because you are doing so, because that is a more difficult thing to pull off in a tabletop RPG, you're being rewarded with an additional roll of the die at the end of it. And then similarly, you get that bonus for getting the jump on someone with the surprise round feature. Okay, so finesse. Once again, using a 5e term here, but in a way that is, I believe, different than it is in 5e. Finesse originally states, when you attack a creature with this weapon and are not wielding any other weapon or shield, your attack deals an additional 1W damage. Once again, you're beginning to see how these weapons are, hopefully, as I was saying, speaking louder than the actions used to take them, because a weapon could be a finesse weapon, it could also be a stormer weapon, and so if you're wielding a light club, and just a light club, running in to attack someone would be, you deal 1d6 damage to them as a part of your attack, but because you're just wielding the club, that's another 1d6 damage, and because it's a finesse weapon, which is a lighter weapon, it's another 1d6, so that one attack now does 3d6 damage. And I think that is getting away from the core mechanics of the game and just having this one club speak very loudly. So finesse here, when you wield this weapon and are not wielding any other weapons, or a shield, your attacks are made with advantage. So now, taking that same example that I was giving there of a light club that would have the finesse and stormer properties on it. Originally, it would deal 3d6 damage on a hit. And then if you had an attack that does what? 1, 2, 2, 3 damage, that would be 3d6. That's 96 damage from first level. That's a fireball every turn on a high roll. That is just fundamentally not feasible. But if we take that same weapon now, we're looking at Stormer maybe turning that 1d6 into a 1d8. We're looking at Finesse here giving you advantage. So you have advantage on the attack roll, so you're going to do slightly better. Perhaps even up to one tier better, depending on either if you have an automatic tier progression in advantage tier 2, or just rolling a 1d4 and having that be on the edge of tier progression itself. So you might do slightly better on the attack roll, and you just have a bigger damage die. So therefore, the weapon itself is muted. It still stands out as a club. It still has different properties that stack on it, but it's not a fireball every turn at first level. It's not broken. And honestly, this weapon system that was designed for 5e would probably be considered broken because of how these sorts of abilities can stack onto each other. I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that I was designing this in 2019 to 2023 and just kind of was spitballing ideas here. I like to think that I'm a better designer now than I was then. I think I laid a good foundation, but I needed to be kind of restrained a bit, so that way it wasn't just you get infinite damage. It gives this sort of like Little Timmy sort of feel to it, where you're going to attack someone with a club, and because you're wielding the club, you deal infinite damage, and it just works because I say so. It's a good thing to learn. It's a good thing to get out of your system as a game designer, but there is beauty in restraint, and there is beauty in controlling how a game works in that sort of way. Heavy weaponry. While you're wielding this weapon, your movement speed is reduced by 5 feet. Funny how that works very similarly to shields. That was intentional. So we actually kind of nerfed this feature a bit, in that we gave it more things that it does. But it's more things that play on the things that other weapon properties are doing. So, heavy weaponry. Let me get my pen out here. While you are wielding this weapon, your base movement speed is reduced by 5 feet. Then we added in here creatures that have a strength ability score of 14 or lower have disadvantage when making attacks with this weapon. So once again, it's playing more into that heavy sort of feeling. So if you're a weak character, you can try and pick up the what would this be? A heavy crossbow. And so maybe you can hold it, but you're going to be less good with it than a character who is strong, who can properly carry it. You might be proficient in the mechanics of how it works, but you don't have the strength in order to properly operate it. No one's saying you can't. You absolutely can attack. You can roll incredibly well. You can score it to your 4 result. It's just a little bit less likely due to how your character is built. Alright, it is time for the one that is gonna be a little bit difficult here. It's gonna require a bit more writing. Loading. Man, it's already 5 o'clock. Dang. Okay, so loading here is kind of where I had to get really kind of philosophical with the design. So, the original text here says, loading. Making an attack with this weapon requires ammunition. As a minor action, you ready this weapon with ammunition from your inventory for all attacks until the start of your next turn. Loading is a basic property, it is always on the weapon. So, no matter who is wielding this weapon, they are always going to be burning a minor action to load it. Which, on one hand, isn't a bad thing. It fills the fantasy of having a quiver of arrows and then you firing them in rapid succession, or like you having arrows ready on your person. So I got to thinking here. I looked at weapons that have the loading property here, and I came to the realization that the loading property exists so that there is another property here called Swift Quiver that removes it. So if you are trained with a bow, you pull your arrows as a part of the attack that you are making. So you don't have to burn that minor action on your turn. Then I also noted Swift Quiver is not available for crossbows, which further differentiates the two of them. Crossbows deal more damage than bows, so that works pretty well to the fantasy of you have to take the time to load the crossbow, but you take the time, you get the results. And so I was looking at different ways to organize this, and I'm like, wait, we're mostly just making one attack per turn. So you minor action load to action fire 1 arrow. That's not really Swift Quiver. And so I was debating whether or not loading had a, place in the game, other than to basically say, hey, if you're not proficient or trained with this, if you're not trained with this implement, you take longer with it. And so, like, a ranged character is always going to be trained in their bow, so they're always going to have Swift Quiver. They don't have to worry anything about loading. So, as far as the theory of this goes, I kind of kept it true to where it was. The loading property exists mostly to be ignored. It is a tax that is paid by characters that are not proficient in that are not trained in an implement. You can have the ranger who makes their shots with their bow. They draw their arrows as a part of the attack. They ignore loading. They don't have to take what ended up becoming the load ammunition action. And so a lot of this came into load ammunition becomes an action, and then we take that action at the same time as we take our other action. So it doesn't take time, unless of course you're not trained. Therefore, once again, action-oriented design. It's all about the actions that you take and the choices that you make with your character to either be trained in this or not. So we have a bit more to write here, because as I was thinking, like, okay, so we're going to be taking these 2 actions at a time. We're going to have an item interaction called load ammunition. from a game developer standpoint and from a game consumer standpoint, if I'm flipping through the actions section of a book and I open it to, hey, what all actions can I do? What all item interactions I can be? I would kind of be spooked off of an RPG. Maybe not fully, but at least definitely in part, by seeing, hey, one of the actions that you can take and are probably expected to take if you want to play a ranged character is called load ammunition. That makes me think that the game itself has, it requires weapon ammunition tracking. It requires this minute and granular understanding of what actions you take in combat in order to affect what your character can do and how effective they can be in combat. And so therefore there is an extensive tax on playing a ranged character. And so built into that, I wrote an entire sidebar on tracking ammunition and loading weapons. And so that's going to be accompanying the special action for loading. Basically describing what I just said and the design philosophy around it. Saying, hey, you might be seeing this and saying, hey, does this game really require tracking ammunition, tracking actions that closely? And it requires tracking actions closely because it's an action-oriented fantasy tabletop RPG experience. But don't sweat it. If you want to play a martial character, it might take you a little bit more to pick up a bow. But if you want to play a ranged character, like a ranger, you're not going to have to worry about this action because you're just going to automatically take it as part of your attack. And then crossbows themselves, who live outside of the Swift Quiver property, are balanced in such a way that you are getting more damage for that minor action. It is one of those situations where you would have multiple damage dice that would scale up per your attack roll. And I think the same thing would go for firearms as well, given that we were talking about them before. Firearms are going to have the loading property and not necessarily have a Swift Quiver equivalent. Maybe some of them will if you want to do some like gun fu stuff, but I don't know how much we have sketched out of that on that front with our weapon table, so we might end up having to do that bit of design live, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But yeah. So, loading. We're gonna go ahead and write up that change here. So I'm gonna flip back here because there's a couple different things that because once again, I said I have a couple different things that I wrote up about the loading property so that we can make it work. Making an attack with this weapon requires ammunition. On your turn, you can take the load ammunition minor action to ready this weapon with ammunition from your inventory for all attacks until the start of your next turn. There we go. So that is the new loading property. And accompanying that, we're going to go ahead and jump over to our core rulebook here. Core rulebook, there we go. And we're going to jump to our actions section here. Where are you? Actions, there we go. Item interactions, there we go. Oh yeah. Engagement interactions. No, we want item interactions here. Mount or dismount a steed. Yes. We're gonna just kind of jump in right in between these actions here. Load ammunition. Hilariously, we did not write a description here. So we're gonna just put that tag there, and then make a comment to come back here. All right, so given that this is a single effect ability, I'm going to just copy ready or loose a shield. That'll be fine. Boom, there we go. Get rid of that extra space there. Get rid of that extra space there. All right. And then we're going to just throw a comment here to just come back to it. So, at will, minor action, yes. Implement. Weapon with the loading property. Range self, target self. Our text here is going to be, you ready your weapon with ammunition from your inventory for all attacks made until the start of your next. There we go. That is the, hang on. Load ammunition action there. So accompanying this here is going to be, this is what, heading number 6, this is heading number 5. Okay. Control Alt 6. Ammunition and loading weapons. A bit of a sidebar. So we're going to go ahead and just automatically default this to slightly indented, as is kind of the language of sidebars in this game, and as far as its formatting goes. So, the Underkeeper RPG is designed to support several styles of gameplay, but primarily presents itself as a tactical heroic monster fighting game. The load ammunition, we don't need to put that in single quotes there, since we have access to italics that we don't have in here. Load ammunition action is a granular reflection of requirements for characters without a martial class and training with ranged weapons. All martial classes gain the feature weapon training at first level, which grants additional features and effects to their weapons. Most ranged weapons have the trained property Swift Quiver. Actually, we shouldn't say most because we were talking about firearms earlier and crossbows, which all might not. So many ranged weapons have the trained property Swift Quiver, which allows for drawing ammunition as a part of the same action. As attacking. Similarly, the RPG is designed in such a way that the granular tracking of standard ammunition, arrows, and crossbow bolts is wholly optional, favoring the passive abstraction of restocking spent adventuring equipment during a character's downtime activities. This is my "I've got you, bro" paragraph here. This is me saying, "Trust me, trust me, don't worry." And on one hand, it doesn't feel great to have to kind of write that because it feels like I am carving out a concession here. But I feel like having that is a useful, just kind of point and see sort of thing. Like, don't worry, I have considered this. I've considered how it looks. But I feel like it is still useful to the core game experience to have an option like that in here. Is that going to go better there? No. Yeah, we'll put it there. Let's see here. Can I? There we go. That seems better, I think. I don't know. I don't know anymore. Let's just have one space there. There. We'll call that good. So that's going to be the loading property. That's, how many more of these do I have? No, I'm going for 3.5 hours. Failing experimentation reach, returning with. Dang, it's still a lot. I think I might have to call it here. Hang on. Before I do, let me quick survey here. Because like I think I'm gonna be streaming again tomorrow. I feel very good in that. In that probability. So yeah, I want to continue talking about and building this whole sort of system. I want to continue talking about weapon properties and designing that out there. Let's go ahead and don't. Okay, so I'm just kind of looking at raid options here. I think I've found a good candidate that should be hopefully similar to everything here. Give me 1 second. Where is the give me my raid dash, please. Please. Sometimes I'm not sure what else go. Okay, but yeah, no, I'm thinking we're gonna be back here tomorrow. We're gonna be able to tackle that, all sorts of stuff. We're gonna finish up properties. We're gonna finish up flourishes here. And therefore, let's go ahead and get this going here. But until then, wow, sorry about there. Oh, it's probably triggered on me starting the whole raid process there. That's cool. Stay hydrated, take care of yourself. Thank you. That's great advice for everyone watching. Stay hydrated, take care of yourself. I hope you guys all have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. But until then, here goes a raid. Enjoy Red Sage VT's. Looks like homebrewing of a either TTRPG setting or their own game. Enjoy. And